All right, well, I'm not going to let the gallery intro run for too long this time. I think I'm going to be going in and probably cutting down and trying to edit a lot of my past streams and keep my new streams a little bit more on target. You can hear there's a motorcycle outside revving away. There it goes, it drives away. I don't know if you heard that or not, but yeah, that was definitely there. So what's going on for Thursday? ORKTOBER, the day whatever, because we stopped counting at day 5. Well, we stopped counting after the day of the fist, but at that point it's all irrelevant, right? So let's say hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the Eternal Chronicles live stream. I'm Christian, your host, your humble servant, and your new god, something like that. So how's everybody doing? I think I already asked that. If you're in the chat, throw me a holla holla or whatever. We'll have to come up with our secret code for people in the chat and what they do. I think you should just holla holla, right? Because that's probably the cringiest, cheesiest thing you could do. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at, this is pictures of artwork from the Rogue Trader rulebook and from the ancillary promotion of the Rogue Trader rulebook. And why am I got Rogue Trader on the brain? Well, it's not just because I'm painting Rogue Trader orcs for ORKTOBERfest. It's because I'm moving into a whole Rogue Trader obsession. Big shout out. Hey, Javier. Wag indeed. Thanks for joining us. So as I was saying, a Rogue Trader. I'm moving into a Rogue Trader thing mainly because, well, for a number of reasons. The reason that it's happening right now is because I got the mad hookups on some sweet, sweet Rogue Trader models, and literally enough that I can do the vision in my head of what I want to do with some of the content for this channel when I start moving into produced content and battle reports. When things open up again and literally I can actually have people in my home again, or people can congregate in groups large enough that we can play a few games and stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at Rogue Trader, because as fortune would have it, and big shout out to Logan's Miniature Mart for somehow pulling these things out of the warp. It's funny, you think back, like you think that like sealed product from 30 years ago, and I've never had sealed product from 30. Everything I ever bought I opened and did something with, right? The fact that there are still sealed product out there that you can get your hands on is, I guess, I should give some props to people who collect, because I usually kind of deride people who collect. I'm usually like, I don't want to be a collector. I just want to open up my little models and play with them. But people collect and stored sealed product, or they just had sealed product and it got thrown into a box and forgotten about, or it's open product. Most of this orc stuff that I bought, very little of it was sealed product. However, on the subject of sealed product, and I'm going to do this as a bonus show maybe this weekend. I'm going to be doing the art show on Saturday a little bit later. Normally I do it around 9:30, 10 a.m. in the morning, but I have to go and run an errand on Saturday morning. So I'm going to do the art show a little bit later. And I kind of want to talk about, I know who I'm going to cover in the art show, and it is related to ORKTOBER, definitely, in terms of the artists that I want to cover on that show. But I want to do a bonus stream. And what's this bonus stream going to be? This bonus stream is going to be unboxings. Because everyone loves unboxings. The internet loves unboxings. YouTube loves unboxings. I've seen enough unboxing videos to know. And the greatest unboxing video of all time is, of course, Bardic, the Bard, doing his reboxing unboxings, right? And he's done some of those. I think his most famous one is obviously the Hero Quest, but he's done a few other games where he's reboxed the game, because it's obviously something that he had for decades and couldn't do a legit unboxing. But I'm going to do some legit unboxings. Not that this isn't stuff that I haven't, that like I'm going to be amazed by. I am amazed by this stuff. So huge shout out. Logan's Miniature Mart. Go check him out on Facebook, Logan's Miniature Market. he's got the stuff. I don't know where he pulls the stuff out of, but it's amazing. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick little flasher. So this is a box, and I'll make sure that you can't see the lid because it's got someone else's address on it. And in this box, there's there you go. There's the address. So in this box is just a giant pile of blisters, Rogue Trader era blisters. Actually, this blister up here is this is actually a second edition 40K blister, but the model in it is Rogue Trader era. So yeah, so that is a whole lot of sealed product that is going to be opened, assembled, cleaned, primed, and painted, and then played with, like little toy soldiers. And I'm extremely excited for that. So, and I'm really itching to open them. So I'm going to open something today, just because I can't wait. I can't wait to I have to open something. So I'm going to open something today because I got these blisters last night. Was it last night, Alex, that you dropped this by, or was it the night before? I don't know. Anyways, yeah, I think it was last night. I can't even remember days anymore. So yeah, so I got these blisters from Logan's Miniature Mart, and my buddy Alex dropped them by last night, and I immediately just started like wanting to just start ripping things open then and putting guys on bases and sorting them and organizing them and seeing what I had and figuring out. So I kind of did that by looking through the blisters and be like, okay, well, I've got enough to do this sort of stuff. I've got enough to do 2 little war bands of something that I can. And so what this is all going to be leading up to is shooting narrative gameplay for the channel. And that's where I'm going to go. And I'm just wondering what's going on here. Quick checkup. Just checking chats and stuff. Seeing if everything is okay. How's everything looking out there? Oh, that's really hot, Nico. My buddy Nico just showed a picture of his, what do you call him? Corpse Grinder cult. Necromunda, his leader. He's just made a cool leader, and I like what he's done with it. And, yeah. Let's go back to things that make sense. All right. So, yeah. I'm going to switch over to the master shot, and you're going to see what's going on the table right now. Boom. As you can see, there is a lot going on the table. I'm just going to tuck in here a little bit, if I can. So yeah, there's a lot going on the table right now. Let's zoom this in, and I'll try and explain. Oh, and there's an amble on the table. So yeah, speaking of Rogue Trader, I've never owned an amble before. So, and I own one now. And I'm really hyped that I now own an amble. So again, huge shout out to Logan over there, Michael Logan at Logan's Miniature Mart, for finding this in a box somewhere. And you can see that there are some random things on the table here. My orcs, my giant pile of orcs that I've been working on, and I'm going to try and work on some of them today. And I've got the Dreadnought. So there's the Dreadnought base. So I think we'll probably start off the creative portion of the show. Not that I haven't been creative for the last 10 minutes, but, you know, by working on the base. I haven't actually even looked at the base. I took them off the shelf and put them here without looking at the base so that we can sort of look at it together. My war boss is sitting over here without a base because I'm probably going to rebase him. If I keep him as my war boss, because there is a possibility he may be swapping out with someone else as my war boss. And then I've got my buggy over here for de Commissar. And what I want to do is this little grot here. I'm gonna be removing his sword, and I've got these. These are I think I got these. They probably came from Warlord Games when I bought a bunch of pikemen models for pike and shot. So that's what these are. So this is some really nice, and they're going to be orc banner pulls. So I already drilled a hole in the back of the buggy here where I want it to stick. So it's going to go on, and it's going to sit in the hole like so. So you can see it's sticking it straight up, and it's pretty high, but it's going to need to be that high because he's going to be standing on it, and I want it to have clearance. So I'll cut it down to whatever height I feel is actually appropriate, and the height may be determined by the piece of battle foam that I have that I think is only 2.5 inches deep that I want to store all my orc vehicles in. So that may determine the height of the banner. But I want the banner to come out as a flag, not as a standard, but as a flag flowing backwards. And it's going to say it's the commissar, so it's got to be commissarish, kind of in some way. Because when I get around to painting him, which will probably be next week, I want to paint him and I want to start working on the buggy and the other buggies that I have. I have 2 other buggies. Let's pull them down here. I'm calling them the Burninators because they both have multi-meltas. So I got 2 more buggies here that I've been cleaning. So I bought these on eBay and have just been cleaning and restoring them. And yeah, so the weapons I got 2 multi-meltas. So yeah, so that's 2 more buggies for me. And they will be part of my clan list because some of the things in my army list changed overnight as a result of this bonanza that I received. So that's something that I will do, and I can do that today. It probably wouldn't take that long for me to convert up this guy. So basically, it's a matter of removing the sword, removing the pommel off the sword, and drilling a hole straight through the hand so that this can then fit through the hand. So that when this is like this, he will be standing on the edge, probably with this foot in the air. So I'll cut the tab off, reposition this leg so that it's standing here, so that he's like hanging off the side there with his little sawn-off shotgun. And he's the little, his name is, I don't know, what would be an assistant commissar's name? Would be like a white shield? No, I call him I'll just call him Fetch It, really. I mean, that's what most orcs call their grots, is that, well, that's one's Fetch It, because he's the one who goes gets me stuff when I need to go get me stuff. So I'll do that on stream. You can see I've got my Scorcher back here. I primed it, so it is all ready to go, and I've got the rider here. So this is all ready to go to start painting, and again, I will probably start work on this next week. And if you want to know what it's going to be painted like, you can look at my war track and see that I've kind of done like an olive green, a bright olive, not camo, but basically a bright olive green paint for it, because I want them to look like militarized vehicles. But what I do want to do with this one is on the giant turret here, I want to paint a big like dragon mouth, kind of like U.S. soldiers in Korea would take their Sherman tanks and paint giant mouths on them because they were told, probably through some sort of propaganda network, and it may be true, I don't know, that the North Koreans thought that U.S. tanks were monsters. So they would paint these like horrific mouths and faces on the front of the Sherman tanks to scare the North Korean soldiers. I don't know if this is accurate or not. But I have seen plenty of photos. It wasn't really something that was done in World War II, but in Korea, which was only a few years later, it became sort of a common practice for U.S. Tank companies or whatever to do that sort of stuff. And then you can see these little silver guys here. These are some new models that I acquired. So I did open one blister because these two were in a blister together. But this is another boy with a bolter that I didn't own, so fantastic. I now own him, which means he will then go into this big pile of orc boys over here to be painted. And this guy, who's just absolutely insane because he's got these like crazy googly eyes, he's got a power sword, so he's going to be joining my war boss's retinue as a knob, probably. And I'll see if I can roll him up some crazy bionic eyes, because he could get like, his eyes could be auto senses, right? Like that's kind of cool. And I went through Here We Go briefly yesterday and touched on almost like less than any. I just sort of looked at the art and looked at some of the stuff. All the rules section in the front I didn't even go over. So rolling up bionics, making custom combi weapons where you basically are just rolling on charts to see how many different barrels and how many different types of guns your orc has strapped together. Yeah, so so I'll talk about these other metal guys I got too. So as Kismet would have it, this is the guy I was missing. This is the leader of the Space Orc Raiders box set. What's his name? Bullgrunt or something? I can't remember. Bullgut. Anyways, he's the leader. So I ordered this model and instead got a duplicate of his variant, which I will now show you. So this is his variant, which I got a while back. And then this is the original. So this is the original. This is the one that Kev Adams basically did a different version of. So this one's got a different head. Helmet's been different. There's a few different changes here. This guy's got a plasma pistol. That's hot. And the chainsword is a little bit different. Other than that, they're basically the same model. So instead, this guy's got ammo packs here for his bolter, whereas he's got a really cool little plasma pistol. So he's got a bolter, a plasma pistol, and a chainsword. So he's actually pretty awesome. So he'll be in my Nob Squad as well, or he'll be detached from my Nob Squad to lead my big mob. And this guy will be in the Nob Squad. We'll see how it goes. So that's another model that arrived to me yesterday. And then these three arrived. So, and these three I'm really excited about because it allows me to do a number of things that I didn't think I'd be able to get my hands on these three models. And the fact that they just sort of appeared out of nowhere with a bunch of other stuff. But specifically these three models. These are the three that I saw and my eyes went like this big and I had to have them, right? So these are I want to call them almost prototype because they are the prototypes for what would become the Odd Boys when Here We Go was released, because these models came out with no rules, and there was another one that I'm missing I still don't have, and that's the Weird Boy, who could be a fantasy shaman. Like he's basically like a shirtless orc wearing a cloak. So he's totally unlike the newer Weird Boys. But these were sort of the prototypes that Kev did. And another thing that I noticed about them is that they are small. Like their size comparison to, well, let's just take a regular Orc Boy. So let's take one of these Orc Boys. So that's about okay because these guys are pretty small. But when you start comparing him to the larger guys of their time, and even let's say the model that predates this and is the actual first mech boy, which is the Hop Splat Gun guy, who is now going to be a mech boy again. Remember I said that I was going to be using him as a runt herd? Well, now that I've got this guy will be my runt herd. This guy will be a mech boy again. This guy will be a mech boy against, or not, well, this guy is a mech boy. So I will have two mech boys. And the reason I'm really hype about this is that these are single piece metal models. And I wanted to avoid, for this particular army, because I'm using all the old space orcs, the basically the pre-1990 when they decided to make orcs without arms. So like this mech boy, who would have been a mech boy in my army, but is now going to be a freebooter mech boy. Because again, plans changed as soon as these models shows up. Plans changed for this army. So this guy and this guy will be my two mech boys because I can have two. I can have more, but I can take two in my retinue and then they can be broken off. So that's what these guys are. They will be the two that, and I don't know what they're going to do on the battlefield because, I do sort of have an idea of what I want one of them to do on the battlefield, and it might be this one just because I think it's funny that he's got the whip. Because we are blood axes, and here's the pain boy, who you can see. Sorry, I want to finish this thought before I move on to the next thought. So you can see, so here's the newer pain boy with the little John Lennon glasses, and this one's got the little John Lennon glasses. So these came out and there were no rules for them, and they were only available for a short amount of time because they may have been available for a while, but because eventually these were actually replaced by the proper Here We Go, whatever we call the 1.5 edition orcs, basically the orc rule book, the orc army lists, right? So these guys, the models for these were replaced, and these models sort of existed in a limbo state because they didn't really have a purpose so much, like the mech boy did, sort of, but that's only because the rules for them kind of existed before because there was a little brief write-up on how to use the thud gun. But yeah, so I got these. So that means that my entire Blood Axe army will all be made up of almost entirely solid one-piece orcs that are also scaled right to each other because, as I showed you, the model size increased when they came out with Here We Go and stuff. So here he is beside a regular orc, and he's a big bad dog, but it's not too bad. But when you start looking at some of the other guys and stuff, and I don't care about the war boss because he's huge and he should be a war boss and he should be big. And the reason that he's not on a base right now is because I'm going to put him on a new base. So what I'm going to do, and I said I was going to open something on the stream. So as we are Blood Axes, we are able to trade. We trade with Imperial. We trade with the Imperium. We trade with humans. So we have access to human equipment in the shape of tanks, big guns, and robots. So I was going to paint my Tin Boys for this army. Then I decided I think I want my Tin Boys to be freebooter Tin Boys because then I can really do some wacky stuff with their paint jobs. And that's easy enough to do within the freebooter army list. So this guy, he's a mech boy, but he's also a mech boy with a whip. So what if he had a little pet robot that he could whip? So I got this. This is a Crusader. Someone folded the blister over. Is this a Crusader or what is it? But it's got different arms. So this model should come with if you stock out of the compendium list or out of the compendium rules for how to build robots. It's in here. So stock in there, he should have a siege hammer, which hits at like strength 8 and counts as a basher for siege. So if you have siege, I'm just gonna keep pulling up books. So if you have siege, there are rules for this guy's hammer counts as a special sort of siege weapon in here, because that's essentially what they were used for. Is they were robots that would go up and knock over walls and stuff. But the one that comes in this blister has arms from a different model for whatever reason. I think it's because they even mention, and this just so we know, that may not be the case. This blister has been resealed. There are 2 staples in the bottom here. So it's entirely possible that someone opened this, swapped out the arms and weapons because they wanted the arms and weapons for their other different robot, and then put this all back together. So regardless, everything is in here to make a robot. However, I will have to custom build this robot using the compendium robot construction rules, as opposed to using one of the stock, whatever this robot's called. I think this one's not the Crusaders, not the Conqueror. Maybe it is. Let's see if I can quickly find robot rules here. Dreadnoughts, Ogrins, Dreadnoughts. I think robots are after. Here we go. Robot construction rules. So robot construction rules are hilarious. You basically choose a set of build points. So, look at me knocking over models. So here you can see the race, Imperial, Orc, Eldar, and your build point limit. So Eldar can go up to 180 because they're Eldar and this is better. Orcs can only go to 120, but their minimum is 50 because they don't know how to make small robots. And Imperial is between 10 and 140. So if I take 140 build points and build this guy into an awesome super robot, and then you have to pay for all his weapons separately. So I give him power fists. And he's got what looks like a flamer and a bolter and a heavy bolter. So that's what he's armed with. So, and then you have to basically buy characteristics using build points. You have to generate their power plant, which means you take your total number of build points that you've spent and how many points you have to put into power plant points. It tells you what their movement is. You also have to build programs for them. So you have to build robot programs, which can be anything as simple as a very simple program, which is basically just go and fight, to this, which is a take and hold, to this, which is a defensive program, and then there's a bomb bot for making little bomb bots and stuff. So essentially, you can make any types of robots with these rules, and they are certainly a product of their age. So there's quite a bit of complexity to how these rules function in the game, and how robots have their own phase in the game now. Basically, between the movement phase and the shooting phase, they had to add a robot phase, because robots have to follow their programs. So, in the Here We Go era of orcs, it's a little bit different in that the mech boy has a control device and he issues orders to the robots. However, this robot is going to be special. Not just because it's the only robot I own, but this robot's going to be special. Hey, Alex, what did you miss? What did I miss? You missed all kinds of stuff. You missed me blathering on for quite a bit and discussing stuff. Unless you want those stock arms from a viewer. Dude, you want to send me arms? If you send me arms, I will magnetize this so that I can swap the arms in and out. Because I think that would be cool too. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rip this open right now. So enjoy it. And we'll get all the little goodies. And back in the day, he's not gonna. I will put him on a round base. I will put him on a 40mm round base. And so let's. Oh, look at that foam. Glorious, glorious memories. I'll put that over here with the other blister that I ripped open the other night to get those orcs out of. So here it is. So again, what type of robot is this? I think I had it remember that. I think it's the Conqueror. No, it's not the Conqueror. It's the Centurion. Right? Colossus. Okay, so he's a Colossus. Look at this beautiful color artwork here. So there he is down there. Except you can see he's got the siege hammer and then he's got the big hand. So when you look at the so these are the pre-builts, so where they've built them for you. So here's the Colossus, and I'll read to you about the Colossus, and then I'll explain to you what my Colossus is going to be. The Colossus is primarily a siege robot. The standard configuration combines a siege hammer for attacking fortifications with lighter weapons for use against defending troops. So that's why he's got a bolter in one hand. And then he's got the siege hammer, and then he has a melta-gun on his back for sieging, because melta-guns are basically siege weapons. It is widely used by the Imperial Guard as a cheaper alternative to the Siege Dreadnought, and a few Colossus-class robots are maintained by the Ordo Reductor of the Adeptus Mechanicus, mainly for testing new and experimental siege weaponry. The Siege Hammer is equivalent in all ways to a Pounder, Warhammer Siege, page 110. Do you guys want to go look and see what that says? All right, Warhammer Siege, page 110. Let's find out what a Pounder is, because this counts as it. Siege Dreadnoughts. Oh, it's a whole section on Siege Dreadnoughts. So let's see what is. Let's look up Pounder. Siege Dreadnought armor. Samson class Siege Dreadnought. Pounder. Pounders are solid hemispherical weights powered by pumping pistons, allowing the Dreadnought to punch its way through walls and gates. A Pounder takes the place of a normal manipulative limb, reducing the Dreadnought's normal attacks accordingly. Pounders may attack buildings level 1 and 2. A Dreadnought must be stationary to use a Pounder and may not employ any other weapons in the same turn. Of course, it must be in base contact with the building section under attack. Each Pounder causes 1 automatic hit per turn at strength 8 and causes D3 damage. Pounders may not be used against moving vehicles or other moving targets. Pounders occupy 2 weapon hard points each. Points value is 10 each. So there you go, that's a Pounder. So his Siege Hammer would be a Pounder. But I didn't get a Siege Hammer in this blister. What I got instead was I got a arm with a bolter. Good with that. And an arm with a flamer. And I'm good with that. And then a heavy bolter. So this guy is clearly a anti-personnel setup in this configuration. And I assume that his original owner is the guy who... How cool this guy looks. Is the guy who... I love this. This is always what you do. You just kind of dry fit everything, and then look at how cool that is, and go, yeah, that's pretty badass. And I might bend this arm out a bit so that maybe he's firing, because the model itself is looking off to its left a little bit, and give him the hand flamer raised up so that that'll look cool. Like he's basically he's setting some dudes on fire. And my orcs love to set dudes on fire, as will become apparent when I start showing all the weapons that I have that are basically either plasma, melta, or flamers in this army. And I got a few las cannons. They burn stuff too. They burn holes good. So this guy's going to be a Colossus, a custom built Colossus. And why is he a custom built Colossus? Well, because my Inquisitor built him, right? Or my Inquisitor requisitioned him to be built, and then brought him along with him when he infiltrated and subverted this Blood Axe Orc army. And then the robot actually has a cortex, so the robot can... And I'm going to make a really complicated program for him, because I think it's funny, just for the hell of it. The way that orcs would get a robot is it's basically a looted robot. And the orc mech boy, who's going to be this guy with a whip. So this guy's going to be standing back and whipping the robot, and realizing he's doing nothing, but he's an orc. Like, he thinks, oh, I'm running the show. I'm telling this robot what to do. I'm issuing the orders. Meanwhile, the robot's just taking care of itself, right? Because it's an extremely high-tech piece of heretical technology, if you know what I mean. Because it's true. It's true. The thinking machines are a no-no. The Butlerian Jihad, right? Anyways, so that's going to be my robot, and he's going to be part of this Blood Axe army in one way or another, because essentially his role will be maybe to stand near the Inquisitor and keep his eye out on him, and I'll be putting him on a round base. I'll put him on a round 40mm base. I don't stand on... This is not an army that I'm keeping strict to tradition, like my old Hammer armies. And I'm not sure why I'm less inclined for this than I am for that. But again, it's... I think I said something to Alex today on Discord that sort of summed up my feelings on... Because he was asking me... he was saying that he's working on some Rogue Trader stuff, and he doesn't want to use any modern Eldar bits for it. And I totally got what he was saying, and that's sort of the discipline that I had for doing my old Hammer Orcs and Goblins and my old Hammer Wood Elves was that I kept everything as period accurate as possible. So it's an army that if you looked at, you would say, okay, that army could have been built and painted and made in 1987 when those models were released. So but anyway, so yeah, so a few changes in how I'm approaching this Blood Axe army now. Mainly spurred on because I got some new models, and that means that I have more models to paint, but kind of swap some models out. So instead of taking a Pain Boy and a Mech Boy, who would have been these two guys, right? Instead of using these two, which would, to me, would feel out of place in this army, only because they're a few years later from what I consider basically a different generation. Like these are all first generation Space Orcs. This is second generation Space Orcs, right? So at the very least for the Blood Axes, I'm going to try and keep them as first generation as possible. These models being essentially the end of the first generation, because they came out and they were the last Space Orc releases before all the new stuff came out with the plastic arms and that second generation. So let's look at the Dreadnought, because that is something that I want to do right now, because I'm going to be finishing the base on this Dreadnought over the next few streams, because right now all I can really do is wash it, and then that'll have to cure. But we can take a look at the base. So I will hold it. You can see that there's a little pile of rubble here. And you can see some gears sticking out under the ground. Where I've put on the crackle medium, it's done exactly what I wanted it to do, which is to crackle. How about I zoom in a little bit here and you can see a bit better. You can see the crackles, the craggle. So that's pretty good. You can see that there's a bit of debris, a bit more debris over here. And once I wash it, then it'll become a lot more apparent. I'll actually probably, I will seal it. And then, like I said, I'll seal it with a wash. And then I'll go back over and I will drop some paint primer onto these parts, because they're metal. And if you don't prime them, the paint's not going to adhere to them. I'm going to sneeze, so just give me a second. Gesundheit. So let's figure out how I'm going to wash this, because that'll be the first thing I do. I'm just going to move a little pot of water in here, and then I'm going to move some painted models out of my way, because I threw a bunch of stuff down on the desk so that you guys could oogle and awe at it. And now it's time to do some hobbying. Dun, 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 dun. 35 minutes in, Christian's going to pick up a paintbrush. I was painting before the stream went live even. I was doing some work on these guys. So I'm going to grab a fairly khaki brush. This is a Winsor Newton Series 7. It's number 3, and it's not a miniature brush. It's one of the watercolor brushes, so it has a much larger tip, and I use it. You can see I don't treat it nicely, because I don't treat any of my brushes nicely. They get what they get. They know what they did. So the first thing I'm going to do is this cork I was talking about. I'm gonna put some glue over top of that. So, and what kind of glue do I use? Oh, only the best. So this is Weld Bond. This is just a white glue. What I like about Weld Bond is that it dries quite nicely, and I have a little thing here that's always full of glue. Who knows how dry this glue is, because it's probably been sitting here for months and months and months. It's pretty good. I can put that away. I don't even need that, because all I'm going to do is take some of this with some water and put it in the lid. Take some of my white glue. Take some of my water. Take some more white glue. Take some more water. And I'm just watering down some white glue. Now I could take this and go over the entire base with it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just actually going to go over just the cork, just the two little pieces of cork. Now, if this thing was on a fairly large base that was covered in cork, it would have been it would have been sealed before I even put anything else on it. The first thing I would have done was put all the cork down and then seal the cork. And then over here we'll do this piece of cork. So, and I'm not standing on neatness or ceremony, because this is just the base, and all I want to do is like I said, I'm plasticizing. Remember the big hit a few years ago where it was like the Visible Body, where they had like plasticized bodies and they'd injected like wax into the human thing and then taken all the ligaments apart and then made little mannequins out of it, and they went around on tour to... You know where they were? They were in the James Bond movie as well. They were in Casino Royale, when he's trying to follow the ellipsis guy who's going to try and blow up the airplane. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen GoldenEye, or not GoldenEye, Casino Royale. So that's basically all I need there. In the chat, I don't Inquisitor. What Inquisitor? I don't know what you're talking about. Are you talking about Inquisitor Kafka Dosadi, the Inquisitor at large, who should be in this case somewhere? Talking about this Inquisitor? This guy right here? This guy? Yeah? That guy. He also has that wrench to throw in the works. Exactly, right. When you can, what's the recipe of that yellow? This yellow? It was probably something that I did really quick, so I'm imagining that I would have probably based... Whatever was going to be yellow, I based it with bleached bone, and then probably used Nasdrag yellow contrast, and then highlighted up with, I took a little bit of the Nasdrag contrast and added this mustard yellow, and then probably this linen white. That's probably how that was done, I'm guessing. If I was to look at that yellow and go, how am I going to paint that yellow right now? That's how it was done. And it's easy. The contrast does so much of the work for you, and all you have to do is then go back in and highlight. And then I just did the little blue glowies, the little glowy bits, and then all the tubing on it was also painted, probably Wraithbone or some sort of light off-white, and then washed with Camo Shade, and then highlighted with Dungeon Slime, a really, really bright... if you remember the old GW Bilious Green, this is like GW Bilious Green. And I just wanted... I wanted it to be colorful, and it's probably not going to be part of my Blood Axe army now. It's probably going to be part of a freebooter contingent of some rogue mech boys, because I have a lot of mech boys. Because they were bought because at the time, the plan was to have a lot of mech boys in my Blood Axe army, and now my Blood Axe army is going to sort of be its own little self-contained thing, and I'm only going to have those 2 mech boys in it, and that's fine. It doesn't need to have any more than that for what I want to add to the army. But those other mech boys will be for adding other stuff elsewhere. Colin Duffy, hey Colin, how big is your orc collection? Are we talking 40k orcs? Are we talking fantasy orcs? What kind of orcs are we talking about? Because I stopped counting for my fantasy orc army, which was started in 4th edition, built and played through all the way through 5th edition, reimagined and retired for 6th edition, because that was the new era, and then I built a huge 6th edition army. I stopped counting when I had about 10,000 points painted of fantasy orcs, and it's only gone from there. 40k orcs, I have a ton. I think if you go onto my Instagram, there's a picture of my table that's full of stuff, and that's not even half of it. Like I have a entire Blood Axe army that I'm in the process of working on. I also have what I'm calling phase 2 of my Space Orc army, which is going to be all freebooters and rogue stuff and renegade chaos orcs, basically just exploring all the crazy stuff. Yeah, all right, cool, Jank Master. Yeah, it's real simple, and there's a couple of different. There's a different yellow over here that I probably would have done with. It doesn't look like it has Nazdrag, because the Nazdrag has a little bit of the brown in it, which is what you can see why this is like a dirty yellow. For the other one, I probably went with a contrast that is a bit more pure yellow, or it's entirely possible I didn't use a contrast at all, and I just used regular old paint. But I assume this is the yellow you were asking about, because yeah, it's pretty good. The yellow over here on the back of the tanks is a little different, and these were meant to be. I meant to turn these into hazard. I meant to add hazard striping to them, but they just kind of stayed yellow. You can see like I did the hazard striping down here instead. So yeah. So I'm going to start mixing up my wash for this. You can see this is the reason I wash it is that it needs to be locked down. You can see it's already chipped here. You can see a little bit of black coming through, and that's fine. That'll buff out. So I'm going to mix up. Where's my little mixy things? This is why you got to be prepared, man. You just, you know you're going to need this. You know what? I'll just use my wet palette. F's in the chat for my Mr. Hobby mixing things. We'll just wet palette it. And so what I'm thinking is I'm going to take some Agrax Earthshade. I would like to know where those little things are, though, because I do need them, actually. You know what I'll do? I'll go with the old standby. You can't do this anymore. But this is what we used to do back in the day, kids. I use a blister lid. This is a Rogue Trader blister. And I'll just use the lid for it. So I'm going to take some of my Agrax Earthshade, because that's what, and I'm actually going to pour some out. Just gently. That's probably more than enough. And then I'm going to take my this is brush on. You know what? I'm not going to use the brush on sealer. I'm going to use. Where is it? This is Vallejo Mecha Matte Varnish. No, here we go. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. So this is Army Painter Anti-Shine Matte Varnish. It's just, don't ask me why I prefer this over the other stuff. So I'm just going to add a few dots into here, and this will thin out the wash considerably, but that's fine because we want it to be thin. Now, what did I do with the brush that I had? There it is. So I'll get some wet on the brush, and then I'm just going to stir this up and make sure that the varnish, so the anti-shine matte varnish, and you can see it's kind of clouded it a bit, and that's fine because this is going over a base, and that's what it's sort of needed for. So avoiding where I have put the glue on right now because the glue is not cured, but again, it's not a big deal. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit because this is a larger model that I'm painting here, so I want you guys to be able to see, but really all you need to see is the base. So, and I'm just going to go and start washing it down. And this will let me know how dark all my bases are going to end up. A lot more water needed because again, I'm just pushing the wash around. It's not, it doesn't need to be even. All I want is to get wash into shadows and to help pick out that detail, and then the varnish that's in there is going to help paste everything down essentially, right? So that once it does cure, I won't need to do too much. I won't need to worry about it. And then once I start dry brushing over it, that's actually what's going to really hold the paint onto the base, is the paint that I'm going to be dry brushing over it. and we'll see how this comes out. So Agrax Earthshade's pretty good. I like the way it sits. I like the way that you can build shadows by pooling it, and it dries nice and flat, which is a bonus. And I'm going to use as much of this as I can, so I'm even going to go over top of this. Who cares, right? It's just a base. That's all we want. And then you make sure you get it under the foot here, and then even on the bottom of the foot, because that will just help with the weathering that will come later. Around the foot here, make sure we get... Can you see what's going on? You see how much darker it is now? So, and it doesn't matter that the Agrax, the Badlands and the Earthshade are, or the, what is it? The Agrellan Earth and the Agrellan Badlands are actually tonally different. The Crackle stuff is a little bit darker, but once you wash over the whole thing, and again, remember, it's ground. It's never going to look, it should never look even. It should never look like it was meant to, like it was purpose built for that. And I sort of, when I start adding in, detailing and stuff, I try to make it more chaotic as possible, because it just makes the base look more natural. So there we go. So that base is sloppy as sloppy can be. So that will sit now for the next 24 hours. It doesn't need to sit for 24 hours, but I'm probably not going to come back to it until tomorrow to show you guys the next step. So let's paint some orcs. Or, you know what I feel like doing right now? That I think we'll do instead of... I'm going to do some painting on the orcs in a little bit, because I do need to catch up with my... I did the leather and did some dry brushing on them today. Yeah, dry brushing. If you want to paint miniatures fast, learn how to dry brush good, kids. All right, what do we got going on in the chat? Jankmaster, drafted work. Dratted, yes, dratted work. Colin, how did you come to paint such an old model just now? Hobby debt, repainting? I kind of explained it at the top. So I owned a bunch of Space Orcs, but they're over here in a box. So I had Space Orcs when I was a kid. And one of the reasons why I was thinking about replacing this guy. And I'll grab that blister. I don't know if you saw this at the top of at the top of the show, Colin, but this is a giant box full of sealed Rogue Trader product. So, and that's all going to be painted here someday. So, this model wasn't here at the top of the show. Well, to recap very quickly, I got a bunch of Rogue Trader stuff that all the models that are on the table here, a lot of the stuff that I had was acquired over the last 6 months or so by hook or by crook. Some of it was very, very graciously found and sponsored, donated by Logan over at Logan Miniature Market. So go check him out on Facebook, because he seems to be able to, he found all these old blisters and stuff, and I'm super, super excited to open them. So that was another thing I was going to talk about, was at some point I'm going to do a bonus stream, which will be an unboxing. This model I was going to use as my war boss, because I love this model. This is, when he first came out, he was just called an Orc Boss. And he was like the biggest space orc that GW had made at that time. And he came out around the era that these guys were essentially the cock of the walk. It was sort of the, I call late first generation. So I bought this model when I was a kid. He didn't come with this squig. He actually came with a little attendant that's holding a bolt over his back, a little Gretchen. And I bought that model with the intention of building an orc army for Rogue Trader, because I had a Elder army for Rogue Trader. And at that point, I wanted to do something different. So I bought him with that intention and never got past the point of just painting him. And then I lost it, because we've all had models that we've lost over the years for whatever reason. And reacquired him, sealed. So I was going to use him as my Blood Axe war boss, because I think he fits in thematically with the older first generation models. However, I really like this model too. And I think he is more appropriate as a Blood Axe warlord. And he's big and he's bulky. He's got this amazing axe. So I really like this model. So I think I'm going to stick with him as my war boss. But this guy, last night, there was a point where I was ready to just use him and use him as something else, like a clan boss or something. So a knob of some kind. We'll see. We'll see what I decide to do. But right now, this guy is going to be doing something else. And later on, they would call him a bad moon boss because there's a little tiny moon on the back of his fist here. But when he first came out, he was just an orc war boss. There were no clans when he was released. So, but we'll stick with him for now. So the reason he's here is because I was going to put him on a larger base because I wanted to be on a slightly bigger base than everyone else because he is the war boss and he is awesome. So yeah. So this is not hobby. No, this isn't really hobby. This is indulging my 12-year-old self or whatever. My teenage version of me that tried to build this army 30-something years ago, over 30 years ago, and is now getting around to doing it. And I've always wanted to build a classic old Space Orc army, even back when they were a brand new Space Orc army. It was just not financially feasible. I was getting away with playing Harlequins and getting away with playing Space Marines because that was what was within... I could afford that. A Space Orc army was a whole lot of metal models, a whole lot of time and effort to build that kind of army. And you had to earn that army, really. So, but here I am at a point now where I can do it, so I'm going to do it. So let's chop this poor little Grot sword off, because that's something I can do. And this should be really easy, A, because this is a lead model, and B, because I'm just not going to be nice to the Grot. I could be nice to the Grot, but why bother, right? So, removing the sword should be easy enough. I'm just going to go right across the back of the hand here. And I will use my razor saw for this, just because I do want to save as much of the hand as possible. I want to save all of the hand, let's put it that way. Because then I'm going to put a piece of rod through it that will become the standard pole. So let's cut like that. And this should take no more than like a few quick slices because it is lead. And if I get quiet, it's because I'm concentrating. I could probably cut through this with an X-Acto knife. But let's do it the way... Ooh. Let's do it the way that his arm doesn't bend. F to this, right? Know what I'm saying? There we go. It's like, get out of the saw. Clippers. Slice. Done. So I'll take my trusty rusty X-Acto blade here and then clean up his hand. So that's easy enough. I'm going to round it across the top. Essentially just get rid of any remnants of that sword that might be sitting there. Make sure he's still got 4 fingers and a thumb. Easy peasy, right? The little pommel at the bottom here should just be easy enough that I can just chop it off. Here, I'll zoom in and you guys can get the super chopping experience here. That may be too close. But you can see what I want to do is remove this pommel on this sword so that I can then drill a hole straight through the hand. So I'm just going to start at the back here and remove that. I'm not really removing it, I'm just kind of scoring it because it'll be easy enough to just pop off. One of the things I miss about lead models for sure is that, and of course I went through the great switch over when GW USA, when the foundry down in Baltimore switched over from lead to pewter. And I can remember going to the GW store and the shelves being bare because they had to pull everything off the shelf that was old and they packed it into these giant refrigerator-sized storage boxes that they had put in the basement of the store at Queen Street. And they had pulled everything off the shelves. So you literally went into the store and there was nothing on the shelves. It was paint sets, core games with plastics in it. So a lot of the like the Epic Space Marine, there wasn't much in there. Blood Bowl, so you could buy core games, but if it was blisters, the blister racks were completely empty, and if they were boxes, gone. And then they relaunched, or they didn't relaunch, but they restocked all of their stores. And I think at that time, there were probably only a half dozen stores in North America. Maybe a half dozen stores in the United States. There were 2 stores in Canada. There was the Toronto store and the Vancouver store. So I'm just cleaning up here before I decide to go at it with the saw. Figuring out, so that's his bracelet. We'll leave that. Figuring out where my hole needs to come out, because I'm actually going to start drilling from this side and try and get the 2 to meet. We'll see how it goes. I should just go straight through, but I'm going to go from underneath. So I'm going to extend my barrel a bit. Everything was $5 US, no matter the size. I remember when they had the big clearance. Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think I was actually probably away at school during a lot of that. But I do remember going into the GW store and the blister, the racks on the walls just being completely empty. And them saying, oh yeah, we're going to have stock next week, because they're restocking the entire store. With white metal, which was not really pewter, but it certainly wasn't lead. It was white metal, and it was some of the hardest material I've ever had to deal with. And I think I've said this before, that one of the first white metal models I ever bought was the Great Unclean one. And trying to clean it and put it together was an absolute pain. Another great white metal story I have is the Space Marine Dreadnought that I turned the assault cannon arm and I converted into a plasma cannon. And this would have been an early 3rd edition thing. So now I'm going to figure out where the hole's going to be up here. So you can see, I don't know how, it's probably easier, you know what, I can probably try to soften the lighting a bit, and that may make it easier. Well, it's actually better, isn't it? Is that better lighting? I don't know. I'm not a lighting expert. It's really dim in here now, though. But that may reduce the glare, and you can actually see the hole that I'm trying to drill in the top of his hand here. And it's simple stuff. I'm going to keep my eye on it because I need to keep the drill bit straight, because I want to drill a straight hole. It's just me. I like my holes to be straight. So I'll still have the Goff rockers. My Goff rockers are sitting in a bag over here, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to use them. And it may just end up being that I make a renegade retinue. So essentially a command group, so a war boss and some knobs that are Goffs. And then I can throw the Goff rockers in there. Because Goff rockers are a free upgrade to an orc retinue. And what they do is they actually, I think they give you +1 to hit, or they give you rerolls to all Goffs within 6 inches of them. So, and things like that were very rare in Rogue Trader, like things with like aura buffs and stuff like that. That was not a 40k kind of thing. I think we're getting through here because I can feel it. Yes, we are. We're about to break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. There we go. Woo! We can spin him around. So we've got a hole in his hand now. So now I have a feeling that my pikes here are a little bit big. They might not fall right through the hole. I might even have to open that hole up a little bit. But I use this bit because it's sharp and it drills straight holes. I have some other bits that I can use to expand this hole. Sorry, I've got the construction guys back outside again. If you guys remember back in September, well, the construction guys are back to do their cleanup now and finish the rest of the job. So yeah, so they're out there. Still, this hasn't been going on too long, has it? So, yeah, there we go. Look at that. Boom, right through. So now he's holding on to it. So I'm going to cut the tab off his, take it off there for a second. I'm going to cut the tabs off his feet because I'm going to have to pin one of his feet. Not the one that's going to be sticking up straight in the air. That one I'm just going to clean, so. And then clean up there, and then over here, same thing. So I'm actually going to drill a hole in this heel here because that's where I will attach him to the buggy. So he'll have 2 contact points with the buggy. One that's the banner and one that will be his heel. Just to make sure that the model stays on and whatnot. Because he's a cool little guy. And he's going to look cool on this buggy. Riding on the back of it. So, sorry, I'm just grabbing a decent file for this job. And here's a file that I probably bought 30-something years ago. You can hear that it's old because it squeaks. Okay. So there's the bottom of his feet nice and cleaned off. So we'll grab our, sorry, it just flew away when I dropped the file there. So we'll grab our pike and we'll jam it through his hand. And then I'm going to jam the pike into the hole that I drilled in the buggy earlier. And then I'm going to put him down, and that's basically how it's going to look. And I think that looks fantastic. So he's going to be hanging off the back there. I glued him down onto the base to paint him, or else I would position him on there to show you how he's going to stand. But he's basically going to be right in front, and then the way that it's all oriented, this guy will kind of be poking out under his arm, and once the whole model is together, the scene is set, as it were. Right, so there we go. So that is how to add a goblin to a buggy, and I think that's gonna be a fantastic little conversion. And I will have to figure out the banner that's going to be flying after it. But I kind of want something big and striking because this guy he's the commissar, right? He thinks he's an Imperial Guard commissar. So he likes to emulate them. So he's going to be painted all up in blacks and reds with some whites. And he just drives around with his giant twin-linked heavy bolter here, shooting orcs in the back that he thinks are not doing their job. So, sorry, not sorry. That's what the commissar is in town to do. And this will be his little grot buddy who shoots you as well. And then the driver of the cart has a plasma pistol, so which just sort of ties in the whole pyromania theme of this army that I've got going, because my heavy weapons are plasma cannons. So here's plasma cannon. So I've got 2 plasma cannons and a las cannon and a missile launcher. I've got flamers. I've got 4 plasma gun orcs that, unfortunately, it's really hard to get plasma guns into a late Rogue Trader orc army for some reason. I don't know why. And it's not that they didn't make plasma guns, because they made plastic plasma guns, but really you had to be a knob if you wanted one. The only way to get them would be to take flash kits, to take a unit of flash kits, and buy rolls on the ranged weapon chart for them and roll up plasma guns. As opposed to, why wouldn't you get flash kits and make custom combi weapons for them? Because that's what I do. I've been making combi weapons. But if I want a squad of these little guys with the plasma guns, and I just tossed them over there because I literally can't use them right now, unless I fudge it, which I'm going to do. I'm going to fudge it anyways. I think in my little orc armies, I might allow a special weapon trooper as well, right? So we'll see. We'll see what sort of things I can come up with. You can see I'm sweating because I'm sitting under these lights, and so I'm just trying to deal with the sweat and my ever lengthening hair. I was talking to another father today when I was dropping my kid off at school, and he was saying, I said, oh, I see you got the pandemic haircut going. And he's like, yeah, I haven't had a haircut since February. And I said, well, I trimmed my hair back in August, but I regret it because I think I just want to let it grow. And again, that's just me leaning into my midlife crisis here. Take for it what you will. So yeah, so that's that. I did the base. So let's put some paint on some guys. So what was I doing over here with these bad boys? Well, as you can see, I was kind of dry brushing them. So I dry brushed the clothing, I dry brushed the leather, and I dry brushed the armor. So the armor, the clothing, and the leather. What I have not dry brushed yet are the straps that I do down here. So like you can see on here, I would have to dry brush those. So if you guys want to watch me dry brush for a bit, I guess I'll do that. We're closing in at an hour now for the stream, so I guess it's about time that I started painting. So I'll grab my wet palette, And I'm going to try and set myself up here for painting. So just indulge me for a minute as I move models around. And I'll take a look in the chat and see what's going on. Still have the Goffrog. You could kill a man with those old metal Castaferum dreadnoughts. Yeah, man. Any of the old metal dreadnoughts were just giant, beefy monsters of chunks of metal. And you can see why. It's unfortunate that GW has sort of stopped producing stuff in metal, although they do still release things every now and then. I don't think they have their own foundry anymore. They probably have to outsource the casting to one of the other foundries in Nottingham, which is fine because the best casters, the best miniature casters in the world all seem to live in what they call that lead belt in the UK. I'm just moving orcs over here so I can put my wet palette down over here so I can have my painting set up the way that it classically would be. So I have my palette on this side. Move my little... Oh, I think that looks great. I'm actually really happy with the way that came out. It's like dancing on the back there, holding on. Perfect. Move my tools, put them away. Always clean up your workspace, kids. That's like the worst. That is the piece of advice that I just give and never take myself. So move my water. Two water pots of water. One is clean, one is not as clean. Although they're both not as clean right now. And yeah, so I'm gonna break out a dry brush, or a brush that I'm going to use as a dry brush, which in this case will be this brush here. Make sure it's nice and dry. I don't think you can even see that there's still a little bit of paint, but that's whatever. And I'm going to do some more of this Luftwaffe uniform, which is what I was using on their fatigues, because these guys are Panzorks, and I think I'm trying to work that name into the title of the army. I have to come up with the name of my war boss, so I don't have a name for my war boss yet, but I will come up with something. Is this actually easier to see? Because the lights are way turned down right now. Like I can pump these bad boys, but I almost wonder if less is better. Let's go with that. See how that looks. Like I'm completely washed out because I'm basking under light here right now. So again, set up our dry brush, and all I'm doing is short, controlled bursts in one direction, generally from top down, so high to low. Picking up the paint, getting underneath there, and then that just sort of helps to. And I'm doing a considerable amount of dry brushing on these guys. Because I think that A, it suits them. It suits their older style of model. And B, I'm pretty good at dry brushing. And C, it's fast. Fast. You can see I did all the leather straps. So the leather's all done. And that was all dry brushed. Dry brushing with the leather, mixing it with skeleton bone. And just dry brushing on there, and I'll go back in and reverse highlight or shade. Joseph Goborgs, no. I knew this kid once. Everybody knew this kid, right? Everybody knew the kid who wanted to make like Nazi Imperial Guard or something. I don't think I can say that word on YouTube, but National Socialist Imperial Guard. We all knew that one kid who was like, "Oh, these guys are awesome. Oh, I love my Steel Legion guys because I painted them all in German." And yeah, and it's like, all right, like I think orcs can get away with it because they're orcs and they're just generally ridiculous. Although I did read something today. I don't want to get into culture war discussions here, but something about Dungeons and Dragons removing all the negative racial modifiers to characteristics in the next version of Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. They're basically, so like halflings were always like -2 strength, right? Because there's no halfling out there that's going to have 18 strength, because they're just not big enough. They're halflings, right? So the strongest a halfling can be, and is it -2 or is it -4? I don't know. But they got something else, right? They got a dex bonus and they get a charisma bonus or a wisdom stat bump, right? Like you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have your D&D character, right? So now apparently they've removed all that, and then they've also added in the fact that you can just move your stat increases around. So who got... I can't even remember. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons in a long time. But say an orc got plus... What did orcs get? Orcs were like -2 charisma, +2 strength, +2... Because I think the orcs were the offenders here. I don't know why. Because they're basically, at this point, they're trying to regentrify orcs for whatever reason, as away from being... your ghoulish bad guy. And I blame WoW. I blame World of Warcraft. I blame everything wrong with modern fantasy can be laid squarely at the shoulders of World of Warcraft. So D&D talk, I don't know. I just it came up because I was saying that I wanted to avoid talking about the culture war. But that'll get me clicks and that'll get me views, right? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me what to talk about. We had a jackass who had a Blood Bowl team of undead modeled after the... Oh, that's even in more poor taste than a guy making German-themed Imperial Guard. I don't have if you want to make German-themed Imperial Guard, to me it's just too on the nose, right? Like we know what the Imperium is, right? Like in the Rogue Trader rulebook, there is a piece of artwork that is heavily inspired by Leni Riefenstahl's propaganda film, Triumph of the Will. And there's a piece of artwork in there that basically just says, yes, the Imperium are fascists. And they're xenophobic, and they are human supremacist fascists. Stop making the Imperium the good guys, because they're not. That was what made 40K great. No, I think I said something bad there. But that was what made 40K great, was that there were no big good guys, right? The Eldar weren't the good... The Eldar were the closest you could say to the good guys, but the Eldar were self-serving because they're trying to save their species from oblivion, right? So who were the good guys in 40K? I always said it was the orcs. Because they're the only ones who are honest, man. They're the only ones who are like, we are here to fight and chew bubblegum, and we are all out of bubblegum. We are here to kick ass and chew bubblegum. And orcs don't have any bubblegum. They have chew squigs. It's a little squig you throw in your mouth, and you slowly chew it to death. Oh, how grim. I should be... There we go. So you can see. Blue pants, gray. A lot of grays on these guys. A lot of grays and blacks I'm going. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drop some of that linen and do some, so a little bit of highlighty, dry brushy, highlighty, blendy, tricky stuff. Don't ask me to explain myself until I start doing it, and then all will become apparent. So let's see. You're gonna do a D&D stream? It's trendy these days. I would love to do an RPG stream, and I think I've already mentioned this to you, Tyler. So I appreciate the softball setup for the question there. Yeah, I actually am thinking about putting out almost like a casting call to some people I know who I know are very experienced role players, and inquire if it's something they have ever considered doing on camera. Because yes, it is extremely popular, and RPG fits into the mission of this channel being about narrative gaming. There's nothing more narrative in gaming than RPGs, right? I mean, when I play Monopoly, I always RP as the dog. So there we go. And all I'm doing now is I'm just taking some of the linen, and you can see what I'm doing on my palette here. I'm blending the limit in with what I've pulled over on the wet palette. Wet palettes are great for this sort of stuff because they allow you to sort of create a blend. See? Look at that. Ooh, it's gorgeous. So I can just pull some of the linen in, pull some of the gray in, wipe it off a bit, clean off my brush, and then that's almost needs to be cleaned off a little bit more. And then we just start dry brushing like a hero. And if you know how to dry brush right and you're patient, you can get some pretty fantastic effects out of it, you know? So, squats. Jankmaster says squats. I own a few. I own not as many squat models as I used to. I own about a half dozen squat models, and I now have a purpose for them. They will be painted. They will be. They're the ones that have the plastic arms, and I think I've scrounged enough plastic arms to the point where I can restore them. And they were squat adventurers, so they're perfect for what I want to do because they're squats wearing like balaclavas and like full like turbans and headdress. And I have a squat that looks like the Kaiser Wilhelm. He's got a little what are those little helmets on it. Yeah, so that'll be. And again, I'm the goal here is to build a cast of characters which I can then use to run people through narrative games of Rogue Trader, because Rogue Trader typically, at least in the beginning, was about having a game master, having someone that would actually run the game for the players, or player, and engage the players with enemies and present challenges to them and say, here's the scenario, and I'm going to be playing all the bad guys, and your job is to get from point A to point B, or your job is to kill this guy, or your job is, you know, whatever the narrative demands of you will be what you got to do. So what's Alex saying? Or we got keeping, or those squats run around Necromunda. Well, you know what happened, Jankmaster? I mean, maybe you didn't hear, but all the squat homeworlds were wiped out by the Tyranids. So they don't have a home now. Boo. Like I'm ever going to cry for a dwarf. Pfft. They got what's coming to them. But I do have a few squat models. Not enough to do anything organized, but went through the Book of the Astronomicon yesterday on stream, and we were talking about the pirate list in there, and that pirate list in there allows you to add humans and squats and Eldar. So you can make a pirate-themed force that's human, squats, and Eldar. So think about that. Think about where that might be heading. And think about that giant box of blisters that I have there and how excited I am to have. I think I said on Discord last night while I was chatting, I said I can't believe some of the models I now own. And I'm very, very excited to get them out of those blisters and cleaned and onto bases. I feel like I'm not even really dry brushing now because I'm talking, so I'm not really paying attention to what I'm doing as much as I probably should be. But I just got to get around where his pants are tucked into his leggings there, and then around the pocket and stuff. And if you have too much paint on the brush, then it doesn't. It goes on too thick, and that's when you get kind of that powdering look to dry brushing. Dry brushing is an exercise, a little bit in patience. Pirates! Jangmaz says pirates. Yes. Space pirates. So I got into Rogue Trader pretty much at the ground floor. I was thinking about this today while I was out walking. And I think it was probably summer of 1987 that Nico and I transitioned from just casually painting random miniatures to buying almost exclusively Rogue Trader models, because we'd become enthralled in the universe. So, and in those early days, the blisters that we were getting were like adventurers and space pirates, and like we didn't see a lot of Space Marine models over here. And I think that's because, I think I said this again, and again I repeat myself constantly, that I think that one of the staff members at the Silver Snail where we were buying them, I think she was hoarding them for her husband, because her husband sure had a big Space Marine army. He had zone patrollers, zone troopers or something, and they were painted white and they had big Z's on their shoulder pad. And one of the first games of 40k I ever played was a show up in mega battle sort of like demo game of 40k at the Silver Snail, and it was Harlequins versus no, the Harlequins were like a surprise. The Harlequins came in later. It was, I want to say, Orcs. All I know is that those zone troopers were there, and I'm trying to remember who they fought. It might have been even Chaos Marines. Might have been Chaos Renegades. And then the Harlequins showed up. And this was all this guy's models. This was all the husband of the lady who worked there. He was the one running the demo games. And this guy needs to be washed, so he's just been... And you too. So they did tease a squat shipper fleet in that recent campaign book. Yeah, so there's a mention of squats in, I think there's even a mention of them in the 9th edition rulebook. In one of the lore sections of the new 9th edition 40k rulebook, there is a mention, kind of. I think it's a transmission that gets garbled, and it sort of talks about squats, like whatever it is. Me Snails, Zone Troopers, the store is called Silver Snail. And that was sort of my friendly local gaming store growing up. I mean, there were a bunch, but they were the guys who first, I remember, were pulling in Citadel miniatures, and we're selling Citadel miniatures as Citadel miniatures and not as Ratham licensed stuff. So, yep. Great store. Too bad about it, you know. I think that the fact that the comic book industry changed so drastically and is now apparently on the verge of bankruptcy, the entire industry. But they transitioned in the early 2000s. They kind of transitioned away from carrying role-playing games and miniatures, definitely, and model kits and stuff, and they started bringing in McFarlane action figures, because obviously there was the big action figure boom. When was that? Late 90s? Early 2000s? I don't know. Whenever the big action figure boom was. And there's a great documentary on Netflix about Todd McFarlane and about like him establishing McFarlane Toys and going around to all these other toy manufacturers. These other toy manufacturers saying like, nobody wants these types of action figures. Nobody wants an action figure with that much detail and that much articulation on it. And the price we'd have to charge for an action figure with that much detail on it, you know, is prohibitively expensive. And he's like, no, I've got prototypes from manufacturers in China, and they tell me they can do it for this much, and I tell you that there is a market out there for high quality action figures, and none of the toy manufacturers would listen to him. So he had to basically self-finance. He had to self-finance and do McFarlane Toys on his own. And if you know anything about the action figure collecting boom of that time, he was right. He was really right. People did want really nice, highly detailed action figures that were large and impressive and had amazing amounts of detail on them. And I hated it because it was displacing all my miniature stuff. I'd go into stores, and their miniature wall, where they used to sell RPG miniatures and Citadel miniatures and stuff, had been completely replaced by a wall of action figures. So I fucking hated them. But if you remember that time, so if you can see that, I'm pretty sure it's probably still on Netflix, because does anything ever leave Netflix? Go see it. It's just I can't remember what it's called, Todd McFarlane thing, but it just talks about like, and then I mean it talks about other stuff too. It talks about his drive to create Image Comics and sort of how comic book artists were being screwed over by the big two at the time, that being DC and Marvel. And so Image Comics was kind of where they could go to practice their craft on their own and be their own. And I mean, there's a lot of good and bad that came out of that. And I think that he even said, like, we called it Image Comics because we knew what we were doing. Like he says, we were trying to build brands of ourselves, and that's why the guys who created it, I guess, would be Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, who else? I don't know. But those guys were, they became kind of like rock stars of the industry. And I promptly stopped collecting comics. I want to say in 1990. When was Death in the Family? Anyone? Batman, Death in the Family, where the Joker kills Jason Todd. What year was that? Was that 88? 88, 89? Because that's the year I stopped collecting comics. Let's see what's going on. Satire Art Studio. Hey, welcome to the chat, Satire Art Studio. God, I wish I had better patience for proper dry brushing. I sculpt minis for a living, but can't paint. I paint minis. I'd like to paint minis for a living, but I don't do commission, so it makes that hard. But I can't sculpt for shit. I can't sculpt, and I'm not very good at freehand either. But I'm really good at dry brushing, apparently. And again, with dry brushing, it's all about patience and about understanding how paint moves from a brush to a model to a surface. And patience especially, because a lot of people get impatient and try to put too much paint on the model at once, and that's when you get that like powdering and awful effect. Whereas, as you can see, what I'm doing with this dry brushing here is I'm just slowly but surely defining all the folds and creases and stuff, and then I can go back in and fix it up so that it looks a bit more proper. But again, another thing, I'll use dry brushing as like an initial, and then I'll actually go back and highlight it. What the dry brushing does is indicates to me where I need to put the highlights, right? So I look at the dry brushing, okay, so now it's at this level of brightness. Where do I need to put the highlights to create the proper contrast now? And dry brushing is a great assist for that. Let's get some more of these bad boys here. Bad orcs, bad orcs. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Awesome sculpt stats here. I feel like I've seen some of your stuff. But you should definitely post a link and I will check it out. I'm just kind of, feeling my way into this community right now of people who do this sort of stuff. And I'm getting a lot of feedback that I should be on Twitch. So, continued feedback will probably convince me to go and figure out how to be on Twitch. Because from what I understand, engagement for streaming is much higher over there. All right. I met McFarlane at a toy fair in New York City a couple decades ago. I hated him. Well, any interview I've ever seen with him, he comes across as a arrogant, conceited prick who loves the smell of his own farts. But again, I've met a lot of artists, and I think that goes part and parcel. I mean, you will meet nice guy artists, but there's definitely an arrogance. And if you met Todd McFarlane probably at the time where he was on top of the world, I think anybody would have a hard time managing their ego, right? Not to defend him, but I also think that there's a certain amount of that attitude, that disagreeableness, that makes you a more driven person for success, right? So he probably has a disagreeable personality, which is probably what you were sensing, I would imagine. So I haven't watched your stream yet, but we'll get there. Okay, so that's sad. Okay, yeah. Well, I just kill my brushes so fast when dry brushing. Well, I use old brushes. Like, this is an old Winsor Newton. So this is an old brush that at one time was probably one of the finest brushes in my collection. And this is what happens to them when they misbehave, is they become dry brushes. And I mean, I will show you, like, I don't throw brushes away. It takes a lot for me to throw a brush away. So this is like, and some of these are ancient, and I don't, like I said, I very rarely will throw a brush away. A brush has to have almost no bristles in it, and even then it can be used to clean paint pots or whatever, to stir paints. So I hang on to brushes forever. And that's just what's on my table here. If I go over here, I've got a whole bunch more brushes sitting over there. And some of them are, you know, like I said, I don't throw brushes out for any reason. I don't know, you know, at some point I will need this. And as of course, it's another Winsor Newton Series 7 that I've just absolutely mangled into the ground. Let's see if I can find one of like a really old brush. Well, here's an, oh no, that's not that old. I used to have a really old Citadel brush that was the red handle brushes. An old Citadel red handle brush. I wonder where it's disappeared to. This is a Citadel. Oh, here's a no, that's not that old. It's a Dungeons and Dragons starter brush. I'm not seeing where that came from. Well, regardless, it doesn't really matter. Let's get back to dry brushing. So I'm sure this is all very exciting, watching me dry brush. What I will do next week is, once I get these guys to a certain point of prepped nature, I'm going to finish them one by one, which means that I'll do skin and stuff like that. It's just that I tend to, when painting troops like this, I just want to assembly line, because I want to get, you know, one of the subjects that I wanted to talk about. And one day I'll make notes, and I'll have a script sheet in front of me so I'll remember my notes. And we'll talk about this more on another stream. Maybe I'll talk about it on tomorrow's stream, and I'll make some proper notes for it. Is why we build armies the way we do, and how I build armies the way I do. I wonder if you guys heard that. That was my stomach growling. I fast till about 2:30, so I'm about an hour away from my first meal of the day. So my stomach is now gurgling away, saying, "Hey, isn't it about time we had some food?" And I say, "Shut up, stomach. You don't know me." So what else we got here? I chose Twitch because the streaming tools are better, but it seems that YouTube is where our community is at. See, and that's sort of when I was trying to decide which piece of software I would learn first. I figured it would be YouTube Studio. You know, my buddy Ash Barker, who I'm telling all of you in the chat right now, go to Guerrilla Miniature Games, tell him to paint his Rogue Trader Space Marines. Tell him to get his Rogue Trader Space Marines ready, because my Blood Axes are coming. So he's gotta be motivated to get that done, so that we can make some funny little videos on the YouTubes. And that's just it. Is that the battle report streaming sort of stuff happens here. Obviously, Twitch is primarily designed for people streaming video games, and body painting. Is that a thing? I can do that. Let me just strip off my shirt here and add some rouge. What I'm saying now. So yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'll put some notes together, and we'll talk about it tomorrow as to why we build armies, the philosophy behind what we want out of building an army. Because I will tell you, I spend more time thinking about building armies for different games, thinking about building factions and forces for different games, than I do painting or playing those games. So, and I build armies now and paint armies with no real intention of playing with them. The last Space Marine army I built, which was my Mantis Warriors, which is an 8th edition, all Primaris, brand new hotness Space Marine army. I played a bunch of games with it, but when I built it, I had no intention of playing games with it. But I still wanted to walk that fine line, and that's my hobby, right? My fine line of, like, what is lore and background appropriate for this army compared to what is competitive and what will be good, and then contrasting the reality of, oh, what would this army contain if it really existed, and then contrasting that with, well, what do I want to take? What do I want to paint? What looks cool to me? And finding the balance between those two things. That's a hobby. That's part of my hobby, right? Is obsessing over codexes and things like that to figure out what it is that I want to do. I need some more paint here. People watching on the chat. All right, so here we go. It was Todd's unfettered sexism that irked me. Hanging around him was like partying with a rapist. Yeah. And again, I think that kind of toxic ego. And I guess we that's what we would say is like an aspect of like, negative masculinity in that way. And that can only be amplified by having your ego stroked constantly, which I'm sure at that time in his life, if you say it was a couple decades ago, his ego was being stroked relentlessly, because everything he touched turned to gold, right? Which means that you now have people coming to you, bending over backwards to please you, right? And if you have personality disorders, if you have issues like generally being a sexist or a racist prick or someone who basically is a tremendous asshole, which is what I would probably glean from what you're saying. You think he's a tremendous asshole because of those reasons. It's only amplified by the fact that he had people coming to him. Praise to the artist, right? Patreons and people essentially kissing his ass and surrounding by yes men. And so I'm not excusing his behavior. Certainly, I have no dog in this fight. I don't fucking know Todd McFarlane from a hole in the ground. I know he likes baseball, and I think baseball is fairly dull sport. So yeah, I can totally get that, because I think, what does the old saying go? Never meet your heroes, because they can only disappoint you. Not that he was a hero. He was kind of a hero of mine, because when he was doing Spider-Man. So when he took over Spider-Man, and this is me flexing some comic book collector knowledge here. When he took over Spider-Man issue 298, and then he did 298, 299, and 300, 300 being sort of a milestone issue. And then he did a bunch of stuff after that, and then they essentially gave him his own Spider-Man. They basically created a four horsemen. They created a fourth Spider-Man imprint that would be just Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, right? It was just called Spider-Man. And then so you had Amazing Spider-Man, you had Web of Spider-Man, you had Spectacular Spider-Man, and now you had just Spider-Man, which was they gave it to Todd McFarlane. And he was doing Hulk previous to that, so he did the whole like Gray Hulk saga, which was fantastic. This is all late 80s Marvel when I was collecting comics, so that to me it was fantastic. And then I remember he did a cover for an issue of Detective Comics, and that was fantastic. Just the cover, because it was just Batman. It was just cape. And if you look at that he did of that Batman cape, and then you look at Spawn later on, you go, oh, he really likes to draw capes. So yeah. So so let's see. Tyler, I know people who stream them riding on Zwift. What? Okay. I'm not sure what that means, Tyler, but I'm going to go back up because I see some better comments here than yours, Tyler. I don't know what your Tyler comment means. On Twitch, that is. On Zwift. Riding on Zwift. I see them stream them riding on Zwift. I feel like Zwift should be something. Zwift.com. If you don't own it, go out and get it now. You inspired me to complete my old 80s orc army. Same orc figures I did 20 for my skirmish on Rin's World Battle at Bring Your Old Lead 2018, but I have 15 more yet to complete. Yeah, my goal is to have an army that not only can I play in Rogue Trader, in all versions of the Orc Army list in Rogue Trader, which means Book of the Astronomicon through to the Here We Go and Freebooter era, all the way up to, if I can, I'm going to figure out how I can make this army work in 2nd edition. And then the real challenge will be seeing if I can make the army work in 3rd edition, because that's a huge change in how orcs play. So let's see what we got here. Have to get to Bring Your Old Lead. Want a Kev face on one of my models. Yeah. Oh, I've thought about, I should contact him and see how much a commission. I don't even want to ask them a price. I hate talking to artists about money because I just want to like give them whatever they ask for. But honestly, getting him to sculpt a model for me, oh, it'd be fantastic. And he does commission works like that all the time. And yeah, you can bring him a model and he'll sculpt one of his faces onto him. So I've seen several of that. Satyr Art Studio, why we build armies? Because GW discovered that they can make more money by getting folks to buy more than just tiny war bands. It started with just D&D skirmish in 12. Well, exactly. So if we want to talk about the development, so let's talk about 40k, because that's sort of the game that I have the most nut in, would be 40k and Fantasy Battle Warhammer. 40k more so, for sure. Only because it was first and because I probably spent the vast majority of my hobby life painting 40k models. So yeah, I mean, obviously the way that it started was it was like a weird RPG. It was like an RPG skirmishy kind of thing where you built your little band of characters, and then another guy took some baddies, and you guys played a game, and he controlled the baddies, and you had your little band of guys. And then it grew into people wanting to play organized play with armies and things like that. But in terms of like what themes draw us to our chosen force. So what draws me to paint, to be cursed with 30 years of painting greenskins, right? And everything else coming and going in and out, but always returning back to orcs, because I have Eldar armies for 40k. I've done a guard army for 40k. I've done a number of I've done a number of Space Marine armies for 40k. I've done Chaos Marine armies for 40k. Multiple Chaos Marine armies for 40k. Tyranids, kind of. In that I had second edition Tyranids that belonged to a friend of mine that he didn't paint. He just wanted them to play, so he bought a bunch of Tyranids, and Nico and I basically assembled and painted his whole Tyranid army for him. So why you choose the army that you do, but also what it is that you do within that army that keeps you engaged with it, right? Like, so what is it that I do? What am I doing with this orc army? Well, A, there's nostalgia to it. B, I can sit down and put all my armies, and that's what I'll do a lot of time. I can't build an army list until I have models in front of me. So I can't be like, okay, well, I need 5 boys with bolters, and one of them's got to have a heavy bolter. Check, and make a list like that. I have to put the models down. These 4 boys over here and this guy, they're a unit. They're a household. And this knob, he's the head of that household. And over here, we have the same thing. So that's what I was kind of doing last night was, as I was going through and looking at the army books and looking at the rule books and just looking at the models that I had and trying to plot out an army. So that's what I've been doing for the last little while, and I did it again last night because it's fun to do. And again, you realize that's part of my hobby is just putting models down in front of me on the table and pew 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 pew, right? Like figuring out like what's this guy's story? Should he have a name? Is he cool enough to have a name? Some of these models are just, I love the One Piece ones. I think they are my favorite, and I think Kev Adams would agree with me because I remember in an interview with him saying that, all of a sudden my viewership just went down to like 1. Is there no? Oh, there now it's back up to 6. Okay, that was weird. Where he was saying that he kind of lost interest in doing orcs when they came to the era of models with no arms and the plastic arm era for the orcs. He said he kind of lost his love because he wasn't making individual models. So for him, when he sculpts a guy, he's creating a narrative for that model, right? He's creating a narrative for the way that model is posed, like this guy, right? Like what's he? Well, he's clearly in charge of something. And he's clearly a big boss because he's got lots of armor on him and stuff, and he's pointing. So what's he doing? Well, he's telling his boys to get in there, right? Go get him. Get in there. And then the same thing with not everyone. Obviously, some are just, we have to functionally be able to cast this model. So it's an orc with a bolter, and you're going to make 4 models that look almost exactly identical to this and just change the little details on them. But it's all about those little things. Like, I can't wait to paint this guy because he's absolutely just an insane-looking orc. He's got this giant, ridiculous power sword that's oversized. This little, auto pistol-looking thing, which is going to be a bolt pistol. But I could actually cut that off and put a proper bolt pistol on there, but I kind of like the model the way it is. I just like him the way he looks. But he's got these eyes, so I'm hoping that I'm gonna buy a roll on the Bionic Bit table and hope I can roll up some goggles for him because that'll be fun. Let's see. So I believe Kev only does the face thing while it bring out your lead for a charity fundraiser or something. Yeah, it's amazing. I think McFarlane bought that McGuire ball for a few $1 million. Yeah, didn't he? Oh, the home run ball. Yeah, it was. It's true. I was coming to Todd because he was a toy sculpting Nexus. No other reason. No, that's just it, right? Like and you got to give it up to him. I mean, yeah, he's probably an asshole, but. As I said to my daughter when she's being sassy, and she says, because I think at one point I told her that Prince was being sassy in a video. Prince, the artist known as Prince. And she said, well, how come he gets to be sassy and I can't be sassy? And I said, because he's Prince. He's earned the right to be sassy. When you make Purple Rain, you can be sassy. Until that time, stow it. And that's how I raise my child. Father of the Year. My army choices always stem from admiration of the sculptors or the studio. Like my current Skaven collection is all about Jess Goodwin. That was me last year, man. Last year, I basically bought every single Skaven model pre 1990 Skaven model. So basically all Jess Goodwin, because he sculpted everything prior to that for the most part. But yeah, Jess is a fantastic sculptor, and I love those early Skaven models. And I have a complete set of the initial 21 models, plus they're up here. I could go grab them, but that would mean standing up and pulling down foam things and then showing you Skaven, which is not what ORKTOBER is about at all. This is not Ratvember. This is the year of the rat, though. And ironically enough, I haven't painted any rats in the year of the rat. I did paint a few, but his Blood Bowl Skaven are my favorite team. Gorgeous. Perry Dwarfs being a close second. Which Perry Dwarfs? There's so many Perry Dwarfs. But yeah, for sure. Paint him as an Orc Medic. Which one? I should do an Orc Medic. Isn't that a Pain Boy? All right, so I think we're closing in at 1:45. I'm kind of losing some steam here, but I'm enjoying the engagement with the chat. So I'm just going to clean off my brush. Another thing I do with, and it's funny because I'll treat these like cack brushes, I call them. I'll treat them nicer than I treat my other brushes, because I'll actually clean them with some brush soap. Because especially with dry brushes, maintaining a good dry brush, because I have some brushes that I bought as dry brushes, like these. These are Opus series dry brushes, and I think they said they're made with yak fur. They're fantastic, but you gotta clean them, because paint. The problem with the dry brush is that it gets dry paint in it. So you gotta make sure that you're shampooing your dry brushes with some brush soap. And failing that, I have some brush restorer as well, which is I think it's a really, what does it say? I think this is like a really light mineral spirit, because it's definitely got a solvent in it. Not that I'm gonna huff some solvent right now, but yeah, it's definitely got some solvent in it. But it almost smells like, I don't know what's in this. Anyways, this is the other stuff you can use: Winsor Newton brush cleaner and restorer, and I'll just dip my brushes straight into it. I don't use it on good brushes though. I use it on these like cack brushes to keep them khaki, so that I can keep using them to dry brush things with. Right? You can see there, get the gray paint out. So. The bionic goggle guy, paint him as a medic. Well, he's going to be a knob in my boss's retinue. He's just kind of wacky. I don't know. He's gonna be a knob with a bolt pistol and a power sword, and I've got another knob with a power axe and other things like that. So somehow I can't help but fishtail all the brushes I own. Could be that you're getting. I'm not one to talk about brush maintenance, but it could be that what's happening is that you get paint in the bezel here, and it dries, and then it pulls your brushes apart as it dries, right? As it expands. So keeping paint off of here. See where I've got all this paint built up? Yeah. Keep your paint off of where I've got all that paint built up. My brushes are the best. We'll see. Well, I like when I have like a new brush and I put the brand. So this is a fairly new brush. I've only been using it for a little while, and it's a number 4 miniature, I believe. Yes, it is a number 4 miniature. Decent point on it. Good for base coating. Nice brush, good quality brush. And then I go and I put it with like the other brushes, and listen to it quietly scream as it sits among all my old brushes and goes no, because it realizes that its fate is coming. Do you sniff the Master's brush cleaner like Chris B? I don't know who Chris B is, but this stuff, it's just lemony. It's got some lemony. It smells like sunlight dish liquid or something, and that's probably just to break up the grease, right? You just seem so Mad Doctor. Yeah, for sure. You know who else seems Mad Doctor? My Mad Doctor. So yeah, this is the Bad Doc. What a great model. And again, this was the first Bad Doc. And the best thing about when these models came out is there was no rules for them or anything. There was no mention of it. GW just released the blister with those 4 guys in it. And it was just called Orc Specialists. And it was a Weird Boy, a Pain Boy, a Mech Boy, and a Runt Herd. But there were no rules for them at the time. And so those were like prototype models, and they're the one-piece metals. And like I said, they later decided that they were going to go with the plastic arm guys and a slightly a design aesthetic more influenced. Well, these would have influenced the fantasy orcs that he did later on. So that's sort of a real. And I wonder where the art direction on that came from. I would ask Kev Adams that. I would be like, where did the art direction come from? Where you sort of changed your style to something a little bit more cleaner and cartoony. And I have a feeling that probably has a lot to do with GW taking the company public and wanting to actively control their image, right? Control their property a bit more and make things a little bit more commercially viable. Because again, you can look at the old books, and if you go through the old books, you can see things getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And obviously, if you look at 40K and you look at all the rule books, and I think I own every 40K rule book up to 8th edition. I don't own the 9th edition book, but I think I have Rogue Trader. I have my 2nd edition rule books. I have my 3rd edition rule book. I have my 4th edition rule book. I have my 5th edition rule book. I don't own a 6th edition rule book, because that was the weird funky edition that sort of happened in between 5th and 7th, was 6th edition. And do I own a 7th edition rulebook? No, the 7th edition rulebooks were the ones with the big black, white, and red white covers, so I don't own a 7th edition rulebook. So I stopped buying rulebooks after 5th edition, apparently. And then I got an 8th edition rulebook only because it was a brand new game, and I was actually working in games retail at the time, so I basically got all that stuff for no monies. Way of the Brush Chris. Okay. Oh, yeah, I know him. Does he stiff his black? I've never watched. I don't watch a lot of other people doing this, so maybe I should. Maybe get some pointers, figure out what I'm doing wrong. Sometimes Brian Ansel would just tell Sculptor to sculpt, and then JW would write up fluff with the miniatures. Yeah, I think that's prior to. Hey, come visit my orc sculpting stream tomorrow morning if you find the time. I will. You know what? I dropped my kid off at school, and then I think I get notifications on my phone because I signed up for a Twitch account, and then now Twitch just keeps sending me emails when people who do things that may be relevant to what I expressed my interests in. I just picked a piece of something out of the inside of my water bottle. This is another thing. You think my brushes are bad? Look at the inside of my water bottle. You can't really see it, but I've had this, and just to show how long I've had this, these are some really old Ultramarine decals from like 2nd edition that are on this water bottle. So I've had this water bottle for probably 30 years. And I'll pour some of the water out into the other thing so you can see the residue that's built up on the inside. The glorious residue. Yeah, I don't know. What are you going to do, right? Old dog, new tricks sort of thing. So there we go. I think we're going to go back and look at some Rogue Trader artwork for a minute. I'm gonna wrap this up at 2 o'clock. You don't look like a hoarder. You should see my storage locker. I say when you're not seriously in this hobby until you have offsite storage for your miniature collection, which I do. So yeah. What are you gonna do? Clean your water cup? Exactly. What am I gonna do? Replace it? I have a replacement for it, and it's the exact same one. So this was meant to be the replacement for this, and it's the exact same jam jar from, I don't know. It's a jam jar. This is my daughter's water pot. As you can see, she's starting off on the road to the same thing I have. And you've got this, like, look at, isn't that amazing? So she paints, obviously, you can see, with a lot of pinks, and she likes the light colors. But look at the amazing residue on the inside here, and how it's like a work of art. So yeah, this was meant to be my replacement, and I just gave it to my kid, and she's been using it. Yeah. So, and then I also have another one which is now very full because I just filled it with water from my which I generally use for my clean water pot. I like to have 2 water pots on my table, one that's clean water, one that's not. And especially if you're painting with metallics, clean your water in between painting with the metallics and stuff, because what I learned doing my 2nd edition Black Legion army for 40K was that using water that you'd mix metallics in and then going and trying to paint skin on a guy, all of a sudden he's got like little tiny reflective metallic flecks, and I'm like, why does the skin look that? And then I realized, oh, because my paint water had metallic paint in it. So there's a little tip, or whatever you want to call it. Last stream, I accidentally drank a sip of my paint water live on camera. I've done that before. I now am extremely careful to keep my coffee cups, and this is my giant cup of coffee. The problem with this cup of coffee is I made it at 7:30 this morning, and it's still delicious. So yeah, you get to watch me drink coffee on stream. So yeah, Satyr, I will come by and check out your stream tomorrow, and I'll bombard your chat with nonsense. And we can go from there. And I'm going to check out Twitch, because it may be better support for stream. And then what I'll do is I'll stream on Twitch and then upload to YouTube, so that I'm keeping my YouTube channel active with new content. Because primarily one of the reasons why I decided on YouTube was also because eventually, when I'm able to, I want to add more produced content, so battle reports and things like that, more narrative-based stuff that I can't really do live and freeform. I could try. I could bust out my gaming table and try and live stream a game of Necromunda, or even live stream a game of Rogue Trader. I got to reread those Rogue Trader rules, man. Whoosh. So yeah, a little paint never hurt anyone. No, well, as you know, I'm a notorious paint eater. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. There's no better medium for mixing and thinning paints than human saliva. It's got the perfect consistency. So if you're painting and highlighting and you're trying to wet blend something, your wet, moistened lips become a massive advantage. And oftentimes I'll stop painting, I'll go to the bathroom, and I'll look at myself in the mirror, and I'll have like little like paint striations painted on my lip. Like many, I'm using OBS on Twitch. So I'm using OBS. Because it seems to be the easiest one to learn. I tried what's the other one? Streamlabs, which is like the OBS Plus, and it just seemed to have a lot of gimmicks that I didn't need, and seemed to have a steeper learning curve because of it. OBS just seemed to be the simple, easy way to move forward with this. Yeah, Paint Eater. Well, it says it's non-toxic. It says right on the label it's non-toxic. No? Was that from The Simpsons, right? Where Homer's trying to gain weight and he starts eating the paste, or the wallpaper paste? Dad, it says on the label it's non-toxic. And he just goes, and he's already like halfway through the tube, and he's like, well, that's good. As long as it's not cobalt blue. There's a lot of paints. Talking about my buddy Ash, who y'all gonna need to go bug. Ash Barker, Guerrilla Miniature Games. Go put him on blast. Let him know he's got to paint some Rogue Trader Space Marines, or else my orcs got no one to fight right now, and they're looking for a crump. And yeah, that's a plus. Exactly. Yeah, OBS Studio seems good. So they're saying, oh yeah, paints, smells, chestnut ink. Old GW chestnut ink has the most. I will get the most distinct sense memory off things, and I'll immediately go, oh, that smells like old chestnut ink, or oh, that smells like old flesh wash, which smelled a lot like chestnut ink, just a little bit different. OBS Streamlabs alert can still be used with OBS Studio. Which Tyranids are old enough to be Rogue Trader era? A lot of, because there was a Tyranid list for Rogue Trader. I think now to get it, you would need a White Dwarf, because I don't think it ever got reprinted in like a compilation or a compendium. So it was never in the red book, because it would have come later. I remember to ask to see my paint pots. Do they look as bad as some of my paint pots? Here's my my Retributor gold, and this is my new one. And you see how it's just covered in gold? That's because my kid likes to paint with gold. I'm gonna blame my kid for all these fingerprints all over it, but it wasn't her, it was me. And then if you open it up, and you can see just how caked and crusted it is. One of the things that I used to do back in the day with when GW paint pots looked like this was every few months or so I would have to go in, and this is what really old paintbrushes were good for, and clean out the dried paint in the rim here, because it would build up on the edges, and then every time you close it, it would then transfer to in here, and then you get this giant buildup, and then your paint pots wouldn't even close. This is what they would look like and you wouldn't close. So you'd have to go in and clean them all out every once in a while. You don't have to do that with dropper bottles or really with the new paints. And if you paint with a palette, which I used to not do, I used to paint directly out of the pot. I would just open the pot, leave it open on my desk, and paint direct out of the pot. I didn't start painting with a palette for probably maybe 10 years. I probably painted directly out of the pot, and then I realized I was probably destroying my paints, and was not. It was probably more when I was trying to do things like blending and started doing more advanced techniques than just dry brushing. Yeah. Chestnut wash was the old Agrax. Kind of. There was a brown wash that was kind of more like the old Agrax. Chestnut ink was still very red. I would say chestnut ink was more like sepia. Seraphim sepia. This would be more like chestnut ink, for sure. There was a brown, and I'm trying to remember what the brown wash was called. But yeah. So there we go. So we're at 2 o'clock now. So I'm gonna call this stream a day, because I'm gonna go out and attack the rest of the day and get some stuff done. I don't know what I just did there. I hit a button, but nothing happened. So I guess that's good. So yeah. So tomorrow, more painting orcs. Tomorrow, what I'll do is I'll pick an orc that's at a particular point of completion and just finish painting him. So I think I'm gonna do this guy, because I do love this model. So what I will do tomorrow is start to finish this model. So that means getting all his clothing done, doing the red, because his helmet's going to be red, his toe cap is going to be red. I need to paint his gun. I need to paint his little potato masher here. And then it's onto his skin and facial details and stuff like that. His belt buckle I'll probably do red. He's got looks like a gorget under there. We'll do that something. What a great model, eh? Just a nice little snacky orc. So yeah, so that's Christian for the Eternal Chronicles. Thank you for watching. I think today was the most active I've seen the chat yet. And in terms of concurrent viewers and things like that, I'm pretty, I can't complain about 5 or 6 people watching me do this. My videos are sort of getting like 30 to 50 watches, but again, when I look at how much time people are watching, people aren't watching the whole stream. They're coming in, they're watching little bits, so I don't know. But I'm committed to doing this sort of thing while I figure out how to do everything else. So while the channel grows and while I add to the channel and the channel builds, we'll do that. And there's, oh, look at that. There's a beautiful piece of Ian Miller artwork with a sad, lonely Blood Drinker Space Marine. And there it is, the image that launched 1,000 Space Marine chapters, right? The cover of Rogue Trader. I'm not saying what's in there, but I may have purchased a art print of that particular piece of artwork. And there's, oh, what's this artist's name? I gotta find out what this artist's name is because he did a bunch of stuff. And someone in the chat will let me know. We need that orc super heavy. Gargant? Oh, this will be my parting note. So I'm perusing through valuation and trading groups on Facebook yesterday, and some guy comes on and he posts a picture of a armor cast orc Gargant. And if you know what that is, you know what that is. That is a classic. Like that is like #1 on my holy grail list of models I would love to own would be the armor cast orc Gargant. And he's like, oh, my friendly local gaming store just put this on commission sale for $350. How do I know if it's real? And I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, it'd be really hard to make a fake of that because it's got huge pieces. Like there are resin cast pieces in that are like significant chunks of resin. So making a mold of that in order to make pirated copies would be very difficult. And I'm just looking at it, I'm like, well, no, it's obviously legit. They only ever made 500, and they come up for sale every now and then, and this guy's store wanted $350, so I posted a comment saying, yeah, could you just give me the contact information for the store that's selling that? I need it for completely unrelated reasons. But I think that enough people realized and probably clued him in that if he can get that for $350, he should race out and buy it right away, because I've seen them sell for like $1,200. So yeah, and the one that that was for sale was fully painted and painted fairly decently. Not that I wouldn't go in and rejiggerapoo it all, but yeah. All right, so gonna cut it there. So I will see anyone who's gonna be back here tomorrow. Same orc time, same orc channel. The Eternal Chronicles live stream happens Monday to Friday. Noon until ? Usually around 2 hours or so. I usually get to about 2 o'clock before I gotta reface the world. Oh, look, there's the beautiful Space Emperor on his throne. What a mighty, mighty... God, can you believe people listen to that guy and worship that? And look at that. Oh, Space Marines. I love old Rogue Trader art. And that's why I threw it up here in the thing today, because I was going to talk about Rogue Trader. Because I was going to talk about all those blisters. And one day I will do a deep dive into the Rogue Trader rulebook and talk about my memories of playing the game and why it's stuck with me for 30 years now. Why I've been doing this ridiculous hobby for more of my life than I've been alive for sure. Way more. Yeah. All right. Goodbye, everybody.